Court is in session in Jacksonville, Florida, where the retrial of Michael Dunn is underway. It's the second time Dunn is on trial for the shooting death of 17-year-old Jordan Davis back in 2012. Well, the case was dubbed the loud music trial because Davis was playing music in his car. And Dunn has already been convicted in connection with the shooting. So why the retrial? Here's CNN's Alina Machado.
Fred, this case is moving along at a fast pace, especially after the judge says he intends to have this wrapped up faster than the first trial, which lasted about 2 weeks.
Let's bring the jurors on in.
The Michael Dunn retrial on a first-degree murder charge is in full swing. Already, jurors have heard from more than a dozen witnesses, including Tevin Thompson, Leland Brunson, and Tommy Storns, the three teens with Jordan Davis the night he was killed. The jury of 8 men and 4 women includes 2 African Americans. Earlier this year, another jury convicted Dunn on 3 counts of attempted second-degree murder and shooting into a vehicle, but could not agree on whether Dunn was guilty of murder.
Based on the jury's inability to reach a verdict as to count 1, I would declare that mistried.
Davis was shot and killed outside a Jacksonville gas station almost 2 years ago when an argument over loud music turned violent. Dunn fired into this red Dodge Durango, which had Davis and the 3 others inside. In the first trial, Dunn testified he feared for his life and thought Davis had a gun.
I'm looking out the window and I said, "You're not going to kill me, you son of a bitch," and I shot.
No weapon was ever found in the SUV. Dunn is facing a minimum of 60 years in prison for the previous convictions. Davis's parents are hoping this second trial will end with a verdict on the murder charge so they can start healing.
No matter what happens to Michael Dunn, whether it's a hung jury or whatever, I still have that loss that's greater than any other verdict.
Testimony is expected to continue for a few more hours, and at this point we don't know if Michael Dunn will be taking the stand again in his own defense, but we could soon find out because if things keep going the way they're going, the state could be resting as early as today. Fred?
All right, Alina Machado, right now they're in lunch break and then we'll resume this very unusual day of court there on this Saturday there in Florida. So for more, let's bring back our legal guys, Avery Friedman in Cleveland and Richard Herman in Las Vegas. Okay, so Richard, you first. You know, he will be sentenced. He's still facing up to 60 years for those lesser offenses, the convictions. But why is the prosecution trying him again for premeditated murder? What's different this time?
Well, it's Angela Corey, remember our old friend from Florida who likes to bring these politically motivated prosecutions.
Come on.
She was the one on Zimmerman, and she's licking her wounds from Zimmerman. So here, the guy's 47 years old, convicted, looking at 60 years, and yet she wants to go after him for second-degree murder, which was hung jury the first time. 3 jurors held out then. They're going to try to prove it now. It's going to be difficult to prove the premeditation element in this case, Fred. It's going to be very tough to prove that because they don't have it's premeditated here. The question, the difference in this trial from the defense perspective, and I do believe Dunn will testify. I think he has to testify because it's what was in his mind. What was his perception of what was happening? Don't forget, Florida has a stand your ground law. So if he had a reasonable perception that the other person had a gun and was going to shoot him, he then had a right to defend himself. The first case argued there was definitely a gun and they hid the gun, and of course the evidence came out there was no gun.
Buy it.
They didn't, because there was no gun. But here it's the perception of whether or not there was a gun or not. That's all they need to prove on the defense. Problem is, the bombshell here, the smoking gun in this case, is the girlfriend who testified against Dunn. Who said, whenever he gave me renditions of the story, he never mentioned anything about a gun. So that's a big problem.
So then, Avery, I wonder, when we saw, his testimony from the last trial where he said, well, you're not going to kill me, and that he turned and he pointed the gun. When he pointed the gun, doesn't that show premeditation? You're intending to bring harm. And is that what prosecutors are going to try to argue? That's what they mean by premeditated murder, that he intended for this gun to point at these kids, and he intended to pull the trigger, which means he intended to harm, if not kill.
Yeah, I mean, that is the whole case. In fact, he actually reached into the glove box to get that revolver, that silver revolver. And frankly, a lot of people didn't predict he would testify. Actually, I'm in agreement. not only did he testify in the first case, he's going to have to testify because the evidence is so overwhelming. And I also agree, the girlfriend's testimony that Michael Dunn never said anything, I totally disagree. I don't think this is politically motivated at all. I think this is exactly the principled moral thing that the state should be doing in this prosecution. And frankly, I think they're going to get that conviction this time around.
You do?
Yep.
Even though the evidence is the same, testimony is the same.
Yeah, there were a couple of rogue jurors, and that's why there was a hung jury, and that's why we're going to see, I think, a conviction this time.
The jury makeup makes a difference in your view then?
Yes,
Richard?
Sure it does. Sure it does.
More of a diversified jury the first time. Now you have 10 white people on this jury. You know, I think I don't think he's going to get a conviction this time around either. I think this juror is more a defense.
Well, if race makes the difference, Richard's right. If race doesn't make a difference, then there's going to be
doesn't it make a difference, really, in the end?
It shouldn't.
I think it does.
It shouldn't.
Well, that's different than whether it does or not, whether it should. I agree with you.
Okay.
Judge Fred.
Richard Avery. That's right. I put my judge hat on. All right. Richard Avery, thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure to see you and hear from you.
Thank you,
Our
Fred.
legal guys are here every Saturday at about this time, giving us their take on the most intriguing cases of the day, week, month, you name it. They're always on the spot. Thanks so much. All right, coming